It's been a long time. I had that for my. My husband was an
Yeah, I don't know. I didn't hear it.
So, yeah.
So it's not.
Good.
Those are.
Oh, not yet.
I just saw them.
I still have an endorsement on my driver's license. It's like, I've been working with every candidate. I still have the right to.
I saw it, my parents saw it in my garage a couple weeks ago. They were like, so you give this away? Yeah, Wednesday. I saw a lot of them behind that. I don't believe it.
It was fun, especially the summer.
Oh, yes, yes. Oh, that's great.
How does it feel to be done with
This is our.
the school year?
It's so so damn to be honest. I keep like checking my email and expecting like
Yeah.
notification from getting back.
Katie Shestok's gonna be working for me, and so she's gonna work on her essay
Oh, yeah.
for first. And so at first she wasn't gonna work at all until July, and now she sent me a text, yesterday, saying she worked half days, 2 days a week. Yay! You need the help. Yeah, so my brother-in-law. Yes. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's his brother, older brother. Oh, that's, I was gonna pass, right, graduated from, so.
I think that this. Yeah. Oh. Our last season. No, no. Anything wrong?
It is absolutely a lot of utility of some guy. They're resigning at his school working in Georgia. Everything is exactly the same. And I can't forget that YouTube thing I'll say. They do jobs.
That sounds like adoption to me.
My son, 10 years.
I mean, our last day here. It comes in. They, we need to subside.
So if he's getting signal.
I don't know, we'll just turn it around and the signal comes on, start.
Oh.
Cell phone. 5 days. I actually. I mean, I get a signal.
No, it doesn't have anything to do with that. It's, there's a cable connection or something. What if you reboot the computer?
Zoom application, but it's not computer, we're in the Zoom application.
Window open.
You know, schedule meetings.
No, it's a.
Trying to backwards.
I saw some
Control the situation.
Yeah.
And if you click on the link,
You must already have an AC.
This meeting is being recorded.
It will end,
Victoria, I think
Are we all set?
We're all set, Lindsay is up here.
And they took the top 2 and the bottom 2.
All right. Sorry to be starting a little late.
But I'm gonna call this meeting of the Addison Central School District to order at 6:43 today, Monday, September 13th. Let's start with introductions. To my right,
Peter Conlon.
Victoria Jetty,
Suzanne Buck.
Chip Malcolm.
Barb Wilson.
Jamie McCallum.
Marcus Gonzalez, student representative.
Mary Gill.
Brian Bauer.
Steve Orzak.
Joanna Doria.
Peter Burrows, Superintendent.
Mary Heather Noble. Caitlin Steele, assistant superintendent of teaching and learning.
Logan.
Logan Price, Business Manager.
We'll learn who the man in the jacket is. Great, at this time, we'll open up to public comment. We'll first look to, oh, sorry, Lynn, I don't see Lindsay.
Lindsay's here.
Oh,
She's a panelist.
I just wanted to.
Oh,
We need
hi
to- we
Lindsay.
need to call her.
Virtually.
There we go.
And then do you want me to read off attendees online? Or not?
I think,
We can read.
yep, I think we're good.
There they are. Now I can see if anybody else is there.
Great, Lindsay, are you having any problem hearing us?
I can basically hear you, but the connection is strange, but yeah, I heard that.
Okay, great. Can you turn the volume down?
We can hear you.
Or do you-
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you fine. Loud and
Great.
great. So, public comment, we'll look here in the room first, and then I'll turn to Zoom. So if you're on Zoom and you'd like to make a public comment, please raise your Zoom hand. Hugh, are you interested in public comment? Anyone on Zoom, public comment? All right.
Lindsay, can you say something?
Hello, this is Lindsay.
Lindsay, we just got to adjust the
You're
volume.
coming in so loud and clear.
Going down by.
It's not.
Don't talk loud.
That's all right.
Thank you. Okay, could I have a recommendation to approve the minutes, or a motion to approve the minutes of May 23rd?
So moved.
Seconded.
Chip seconds, thank you. Any questions, comments on minutes? Mary?
Finally, as the, one of the speakers in public comment, you had Laura Hart-Ann. I believe it's Hartman, but I could be wrong.
I actually
Did you contact her?
received an email from her
Okay.
with correct spelling, but thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anyone else, question, comment about the minutes from the last meeting? Lindsay? Okay, so all those in favor of approving the minutes of May 23rd, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? Great. Bills, Dr. Malcolm.
There were there were two sets of bills, one read on the 31st of May, and one today, sets. There were, the one from the 31st of May, the general account was $878,824.89. There was a payroll warrant of $2,486.12. And there was, another payroll warrant of $977.93. And a fourth of the general fund, I'm sorry, the 878,000 was a payroll. So the first three were payrolls, and this one is the general fund of $167,726. So that was the bills read again, read on the 31st. And then today, the bills were read, there were two warrants, a little easier. One was the payroll warrant, and the net pay that we usually report is $874,915.90. And then there was a general account warrant, which is a biggie. $1,459,211.44. I will say that there were three major pushers in that huge number, one of which is the health and dental payments that go out, and that was for $433,000. There was a transportation amount, which was not irregular, but it was in this group for 130. These are general numbers; they didn't add them up totally, but 130,000. And then there was a payback to the towns. I presume that's cash back to all the towns when we had borrowed money and we then are sending it back, or what does that mean?
It was just a corrected final calculation from the state.
Okay, from the state then, all right, and that made up about almost 200,000. So that's why the 1.4 million seems like a lot, because there was a lot in that particular part. Other people have questions, otherwise I will make a motion to pay these bills.
I'll second it.
All those, or any questions? Comments? All those in favor of paying the bills, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Great. Okay, the bills. And next item, professional appointments. It's good to see that we've got some hiring. Do you want to talk just briefly on how hiring's going?
Sure, yeah. So we've continued to hire positions. I've been meeting with all of the people that are being hired over the last couple of weeks since we last met. We've made lots of progress in terms of what we have outstanding. We have some that are just wrapping up that will be meeting with me over the next week. We have a couple open elementary positions. We have an open language acquisition position at the high school, which we still have not been able to fill for a one-year leave. We have a position at MOMS that's the STEAM position. It's a kind of a previous position with a new title. It was the position that Liam Batches has been in, the wellness position. So it's got a slight title change. That position is still open and in process. So we've made really, I think, pretty good headway on our licensed positions. And again, we have a couple of those outstanding licensed positions that we're putting a lot of energy in to wrap up over the next couple of weeks so that we don't wait, it doesn't drag on. And we have to start problem solving and thinking about, what's our plan going to be. As I mentioned previously, we continue to have problems finding, especially some of our paraprofessional positions supporting students with significant needs. It's something we're talking about. We talked about it this morning and our brainstorming, and maybe reaching out actually to the negotiations committee to reconvene to discuss a potential side letter to think about increasing the pay for some of those positions that we really need going into next year. Right now, I think we have at least 5 that we need to fill at MOMS going into next year. These are students who have that assigned either in an IEP or in another plan. And that's going to be important to have in place as we go into next year. So we're working on that now. And I was planning to reach out to the negotiations committee to have a conversation once I make a connection with the association. And currently in the contract, the negotiations folks probably remember this, but a paraprofessional who's working with a specific student is the language in the contract, receives an additional $1 an hour. And so we want to talk about increasing that to be able to hire that position.
See,
Could you, how is the STEAM position at the middle school different from what Randy Barnes does, or?
I'm going to ask Caitlin to speak to that.
Yeah, it's complementary to it.
Okay.
So it doesn't change the MYP design work that he does.
Okay.
The idea is, so Liam Batches is our SEL
Great.
teacher at MUMS, was filling what was designed to be a
a fourth quarter rotation and what was a trimester rotation of art, music, and design. And that fourth quarter allowed us to reduce the cohort size of those specials area teachers like we did for the core classroom teachers, not quite to the same level, but it improved that equity measure for us. When he stepped out, the leaders of the school were looking for the best way to rehire that position. Bringing in the STEAM allows them to continue to do that fourth quarter rotation, reducing the cohort size, but it also allows them to bring in more design, which is solving an MYP challenge where we weren't hitting the minimum of 50 instructional hours of design for each year. So it's a complement to that. It doesn't replace it in any way.
Thank you.
Couple questions. First question, and I'm a broken record, so I'm gonna repeat it. At this point, do we have, for the existing staff, like all our contracts in place? And so we pretty much know that there's no more bleeding. I guess I'll call it bleeding.
Yeah, I mean, unless there's something significant that happens. People have extended, like all the extensions are finished. We gave people a 2-week extension for those that asked, and then we've had a couple someone was in a process or something and wanted to see it. So we're now like well over a month beyond that. So
Yeah, okay. And at some point, since we had kind of a full picture back a couple months ago, could maybe at some point we get that again?
Sure.
So we kind of see, where we stand. And my last question, on Friday, I attended the Shoreham Community Picnic, which was fun.
Yeah.
And spoke to a lot of parents. And there's a lot of angst right now because they don't know, like, second grade teacher, they don't know fourth grade teacher. And so do we have is some of the positions that we're still looking for Shoreham? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I know that there's a lot of nervousness and, there was a lot of angst that people were expressing.
Yeah.
So I don't know if there's a way to send out an update and, just to let people know where things are.
Yeah.
Might be a possibility or something.
Yeah, we did talk about that last week, and we know that everyone's wants to know what's happening, and it feels, we were hoping to have that done by like today, by now.
Yeah.
And we still have a couple pieces still in play that we have to figure out. So we talked about this and didn't want to send a communication out and then have people cement on, this is probably what it will look like, and then it changes, and then it's just hard to reorient. So we're feeling like it's better to wait till we know exactly, and that will be happening in the next weeks as we have a new principal who's coming on board and helps to figure out how all that fits together. So the timing is unusual, and just given the circumstances that we're in, I think it makes the most sense from both from a community standpoint and sending something out, letting people know that we're still in process is a good idea. So if that's
what I
hasn't
was saying.
happened,
Yeah, that's what I was suggesting.
I think that could happen for sure.
We still have XYZ to do, but as soon as we know, a little progress update, I think would be appreciated from the sense I got.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Totally.
Okay. Last question, and then we'll get a motion on this. Chip.
I would make the point, though, although it is true, there's uncertainty. There's usually uncertainty no matter which school you're in. If you're in the bigger school like Mary Hoban, you don't know which classroom your child is going to be in, even if you know who the fourth grade teachers are. So, it's not unusual for this school at this time. It may be more acute because, the limited numbers, but I mean, it is the case that you don't always know at this point in time what's going to be happening.
Well, and I think what exasperates it is the issues that have happened in Shoreham. And so these are, as parents that have kids that are in the classes that were impacted. So, they're trying to kind of embrace it and get beyond it.
Yep.
So it's a little unique. Thank you.
Thank you. So can I have a motion to approve the professional appointments / transitions as stated?
I'll make a motion.
Laura?
Second?
Mary? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Great. The professional appointments have been approved. Report of the superintendent.
Okay, let's stay on shore.
Yes.
There we go. I think that's good.
So I would like to introduce Andy Johnson over here, who is our new shore principal.
Thanks
for having me.
So Andy is coming to us from Milton. Doesn't live in Milton, thankfully. That's a long commute. But he did a great job throughout the interview process, was really embraced by the Shore community, and he is here today to share a little bit about what he's looking forward to and answer questions as he gets started. We'll be working with all the new principals, and I've found a mentor actually for all of them. We'll be working through, because we have two new principals and 2 new APs, we'll be working with them as a cohort and providing support and thinking through. It's kind of nice when you have more than just one and you're doing this kind of training, and kind of working alongside each other is also really powerful. So we'll be spending the summer and the whole first year really making sure that all of them have the kinds of supports they need, especially now when we're doing a lot of the work. I can't say coming out of the pandemic, because I know we're not out of the pandemic, but in this next phase of whatever this is. So, Andy, yeah.
So I am Andy Johnson. Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to get going. Tomorrow is my last day at my present position, and I'm reaching out to people and making connections, and really throughout the whole process felt very welcomed by the Shoreham community. It was inspiring to see the passion and knowledge and the desire to really move forward and heal everything that's going on there. So it was a really welcoming experience, and I'm going to take all of my experience and bring that to them and learn from those in the community there, and work together to get good work done. So thanks for having me.
Thank you. Welcome.
Questions? I mean, Victoria can call.
Well, so I may have missed in the intro. What was your role in Milton? And how long were you there for?
Music teacher.
Music teacher.
Yeah.
And how long had you been up in Milton?
So I've been there just 1 year, and then I was in Madison, Wisconsin for a number of years before that.
Madison, Wisconsin to Vermont, not a big change except the mountains.
It's a little flat there. But
Yeah.
And where is home now that you're in Vermont?
in Charlotte.
Oh, great.
So,
The right side of
So not
Charlotte
too-
County.
That's all I think of that.
Too close to Cookie Love. So.
You can always bring it down.
Vermont has better cheese though than
Not as yellow, I know that.
Hold on.
Well, welcome. We're thrilled that you're here and part of the ACSD team.
Thanks for having me.
Appreciate it.
Great. So the reason everyone was congregating outside was an experiment to see if you built community outside. That was working. We were also finishing our last meeting of the strategic advisory committee for the strategic plan for equity, and really wanted to get that in before the summer was started and people flew in all directions. So right at the very end there, we came up with, or the committee came up with 5 recommendations. We're going to be working on drafting that. The consultant, Emma, is going to be putting all that into a draft and sharing it with the committee and working to finalize that as we move towards the board's meeting, which I think you all received the calendar invite for September 12th, extending that board meeting time longer and engaging in that work, or starting that work at that point. Between now and probably mid-July, I'll be working with the consultant to help set up the board's engagement with that work. And as we look ahead, how the board will then hand that off and the creation of the action teams to start to build out what we want to see happen. The advisory committee talked about a lot of things, a lot of examples of the kinds of things they would like to see happen. I think we had a kind of a broad array of suggestions of things. You know, we brought together lots of different people. So I think when you look at the examples people brought up, it was coming from different vantage points and experiences in ACSD, and that's kind of what the point of this has been. We will, as we move towards the 12th, and this draft is a final report, we'll also think about how to bring the board some of the data too that the advisory committee looked at and put that in a construct that is accessible and that is meaningful as you look through that information and start to plan forward. Any questions about that? So we've got the strategic plan report. This is our annual report to the board. And last year, as you probably remember, we didn't do the strategic plan report and instead presented our recovery plan in the place of the strategic plan report because of the fact that we, were ostensibly in survival mode and didn't have a lot of the data. So you can see as you look through the report, I'm going to hand it over to Caitlin, who does the lion's share of the lifting for putting this together. So thank you. Just kind of broadly, the structure of the report is kind of setting the context of what's happening right now and the kind of work that we're doing. There is the demographic data, just helping anyone who looks at this kind of who we are as a district, and then looking at those key performance indicators. And some of those are comparative. So when you look at kindergarten readiness or SBAC data, you can see how ACSD is doing compared to others in the state. Cohort graduation rate. We've focused, I think, throughout, maybe this was in the second or third year of the report that we started really looking at the gaps that have been persistent in our data for eons. They continue to persist, and as I looked through this report, I thought about where we are and where we're headed, that a lot of the conversation today in the advisory committee around using an equity rubric to make decisions and to look at how we're spending resources, how we're basically doing our work, that becomes more of a central part as opposed to, I think sometimes we tend to look in the rearview mirror. We forge ahead, we do lots of work with a lot of good intention, and then we look back and we see that these big gaps are still there. And the other thing I think that is reflected in the data that I think we really have to get our hands around is that these are community issues. They're not just school issues. And when you look at the impact of family and you look at the impact of everything that happens for a student outside of school, we can't expect to solve everything in 7 hours a day, 175 days a year. So we have to think differently as we start that planning process to think about what are we doing community-wide. And it's, historically pretty challenging to bring together a school district, mental health agencies, the state. When you get too many heads trying to come together to solve these issues, and those of you who have been on those kinds of committees know, it can be pretty challenging. But I think we have to approach this work with a different mindset and context than we have previously. If we do the same things over and over again, we're going to get the same results. Yes. So that's kind of what's going through my head as I look at the data here, which I don't think there's anything significantly different other than a big drop in math scores. Is kind of the one, I think, outlier. I may have said too much, Caitlin, but what do you have to?
I don't have a lot to add. In framing this, we tried to streamline it a little bit. You might remember that in years past, we've reported out on each action item. I really just tried to make it a little more user-friendly and a little bit more of a summary of where we are in place and time, to use an IB theme. There are a few things that I thought were particularly interesting that I guess I hope that you'll, if you don't read the whole 30-page report, but if you read a few sections, I think it would be really useful. So for instance, on page 1 where we talk about looking ahead, that's where we talk about Act 173. Nicole and I have made a presentation about that. And I think it's important that we all see that coming as big work that is ahead of us, that is work very much focused on access, success, belonging, things that we believe in at the core, but it will be a heavy lift among a weary staff. And so I want you to know that we're attending to that as we think through our planning, but see it coming because it's state level legislation that philosophically I'm very excited about, and pragmatically we're going to have to support our teachers and our leaders in making a real and meaningful transition at a time when they're already pretty worn out. Nicole, did you want to say anything else about that? If you flip ahead to page 8, we summarized math here. I feel, to Peter's point, yes, we have lower math scores than we have had in the past and lower than we're happy about at this point. Part of that is the pandemic. Part of it is that we need to make a heavy investment in math, and we haven't had the capacity to do that in recent years. So you see that we point to needing to shore up our Bridges training, but Bridges is a program, so we also need to think about how do we shore up our best practices, pedagogy at the elementary level. But one thing that I'm really excited about is the continuum of math courses from the middle school into the high school are so much clearer going into next year than they have been in years past. I think that we had some growing pains in onboarding the IB and trying to get a cohort of students up to that highest level of math IB. Our middle and high school math departments, there's a lot of turnover at the middle school level now, but the math departments have really been working this problem over the years, and they've come to a solution that I find really quite elegant. So I think this will be the only section of this report that I read out loud to you. It says, at the secondary level, teachers are collaborating this summer to refine the math continuum in the MYP and DP. Students who successfully complete the 3 core math classes, so just the regular 6th, 7th, and 8th grade math at MUMS, will be on track to enroll in standard level applications or standard level analysis in 11th and 12th grade, either of which meets the math requirement to earn the full IB diploma. So I think that there's been confusion in the past about whether or not our students have to be in that advanced math class to be candidates for the diploma. And there was a really strong feeling that that was too early to be closing paths to students. So the math department has committed to saying that that trajectory of the core 6, 7, 8 classes are on track to receive the 2 years of diploma program math programming to earn the diploma if they choose that path. If they add on the advanced math and successfully complete the 6, 7, 8 and the advanced math, then they're actually on track for an accelerated math program. And at that point, they could choose to do the diploma program courses in 10th and 11th grade, opening up the opportunity to do something more traditional like AP Calculus or another higher level math class in senior year, or not doing math in senior year. So I feel really grateful to our math teachers for leaning in heavily to that challenge. And I think they've got a solution that is more coherent and equitable than what we had before. Are there any questions on that before I blast through it?
Of course. Math, you know me. How long have we been using the Bridges program? Just curious.
Way before I got here.
Yeah.
So ACSU was an early adopter of the Math Learning Center Bridges program, and in fact, we did a big investment in math in the early years before my time here. We have math teacher leaders trained as trainers in Bridges. Some of them are retiring out of our system, but we still have some in our system. So we've been doing that, 10 or 15 years, so a good long while.
Okay. Yeah, what is kind of alarming if you look at the data, it's like we've really declined since 2017, you know, in math and literacy, but more so in math. And I was just like, do we have any sense of what the root cause of that? It's not just pandemic, because 2019 was low as well. And
So we have this year, this is not a direct answer to your question. We have this year gone really deep in our investment in early literacy with a literacy coordinator who has done a full audit. She has a long report that she's refining now to share with all of you in the fall. But to do a full audit of our early literacy programming, the level of training and the reason and the gaps in our training for teachers teaching this curriculum, making sure that every classroom had all of the resources that they need. And she has spent ESSER grant money like a rock star in that she has done, really a data-driven, getting people to the trainings, getting every classroom fully set, and we'll continue that for the next 2 years if we continue with our ARP ESSER spending plan. That level of investment, I think, is what is needed in math also. We haven't picked it up in the same way for lack of capacity, frankly. But I think that though we haven't done the root cause analysis that you're talking about, I do think it's going to take that level of investment to really understand where are our gaps and how are we supporting our teachers in building the skills. We've had a ton of turnover. We haven't had a consistent pattern of training all of our new teachers in Bridges, so they're picking it up as they go along. It's imperfect at this point.
yeah, because I also kind of followed the link to the equity, and the Hanover had kind of that high level report, and they really zeroed in on, at the elementary age that we need to invest more in math and literacy. And, just my brief little snapshot in the classroom, I have to say I've been really saddened by what I see in the classroom at the different levels, which I've shared in the past as well. So,
The rigor of the professional development and the professional collaboration around math before my time here, I think probably is why we had such strong scores before.
Yeah.
And the turnover we've had since then, and the lack of explicit focus on that, I think, is probably impacting those scores.
Yeah.
And then you add the pandemic.
yeah, and right, that just made it even worse.
So it needs a new investment. I'm not sure. We didn't write a math coordinator into our ARP ESSER plan. We proposed it, and the pushback we got was, we need people working directly with students, not coordinators. And the hope was that was the position that would do for math what we've done for literacy this year. So at some point, maybe that's not the way to do it, but that was our last attempt to make this focus. We will now have math interventionists at both the middle school and the high school next year, which is wonderful. And it is people working directly with students who struggle, which is great.
Right. Yeah, and I've done that. But then we put them in the class, like 7th grade, 8th grade class, and expect them, to be there and they're a lower level, and they kind of shut down, is what I see.
Yeah.
Because they don't know the subject. So I'm sorry. It's really impacted, something I worry about.
Yeah, Peter?
I think it's a fascinating conversation. I think Tripp will vouch for the fact that this district has repeatedly made new investments in math and then sort of slid and then new investments. But is there a link? I mean, what we have heard time and time again is that, that literacy piece that we're investing in so strongly is so important to keep kids in learning mode by grade 3. I guess I would sort of hope that would have a payoff beyond literacy and including math. And I guess I'm just asking you as an expert in the field, if that's.
Just to give a historical note before Caitlin answers. When I first got here, we were a math-focused, I think, district. And the literacy work that we had done had stops and starts for years and years and years and had never gotten off the ground. And it took a long time. I mean, some of it has been the pandemic to bring a renewed focus to us. So I think you're right in terms of the importance of literacy. It doesn't obviate the need to focus on math too. And I mean, these two subject areas have been a focus forever in schools, right? Like NCLB was written on this. Like, it's in everyone's thinking in our country that these are the two most important things to get. right? So I do think that the literacy work, in terms of our investments, and the reason we went there was because we have a history of strength in math where we haven't spent enough time focusing on it. So it's, like you said, it's starting to recede a little bit and we need to reinvest. But the literacy piece it's a gateway to all sorts of things in a different way than low math scores. Caitlin, sorry.
I just agree with that. I don't have anything to add to it, yeah.
Just a comment relative, math is so progressive. And I would just hope that whoever the teachers are, that there's this consistency of information about how children can progress, okay? Because I know you and I had this conversation a year or so, or whenever it was like a long time ago. But I thought that inconsistency of different personnel and what their view of what one child could do versus someone else's view was very inconsistent, and honestly, that caused a lot of concern from a number of people. And so math being, to me, so progressive. I mean, you don't have to take, English history after American history, but there's certain math things you've got to progress on, and be consistent is really, to me,
And it builds.
and it builds, and it's so one block after another. So,
So in the regular monthly report to the board, there was a little section on all of the collaboration that people have signed on to do this summer through the grant funds that we have available to us. And one of those projects is a collaboration across schools, middle and high school, to shore up and codify that continuum. I was in the room when they sort of finished the big analysis and said, no, the way that we had it mapped was largely the right way. So let us now codify that and make sure that our units are in good order so that with all of these incoming math teachers at MUMS, we can hand off that curriculum. Having that consistent curriculum that's co-developed by our math department so that it's a curriculum that they can get behind because they built it. Having that and resourcing it well. So we're doing another investment to get some textbooks to support our incoming teachers at MUMS. That is the foundational work for this Act 173 work, right? Having a common and strong curriculum, designing for maximum access within the classroom, which is what our teachers will be focusing on next year in their collaboration, is really strengthening the access through universal design for learning. But then having these multi-tiered systems of support, which are data-driven. So it's not one teacher's best guess about how kids are doing or what they're capable of, but instead we have common metrics to inform how we move resources and how we move interventions to the students to meet those common agreements, common understandings about what students can do. So that's that Act 173 work that we're talking about being so big and so important. So, and then it gets to, do we also do a big investment in shoring up all of the math PD? It'll probably be a small and modest investment because teachers and schools are carrying so much right now, we can't just keep layering it on. And so we need to keep finding the ways that we can improve what we do rather than add more things until the time is right. Yeah, Barb?
Yeah, and the math textbooks will be good because I've just spoken to parents as well, and it's like, I can't even help my child. Whereas, when I've helped my stepson, whatever, I wanted to make sure I was teaching it the way the textbook was, so I didn't confuse it. So hopefully that'll help a little bit.
Yeah, although you might be disappointed to know we're not buying enough books to send them home. And it's not because we can't afford to, because we can write it into ESSER if we want to. The idea is that the teachers don't want to be teaching directly from a book and a slave to that as the curriculum, but rather they want to have a class set for reference so that the kids can use them in the class. But it won't be the kind of book where kids are taking it home and doing a lot of homework out of that book, based on the way that the math teachers are envisioning this resource for them, for their MUMS colleagues at this point. Okay, yeah.
I just wanted to follow up to try and get to the bottom of the misconception about having the standard level be a qualification in the DP program. Just wondering, so is it a balance of standard level and higher level classes that are required for the DP? Or is it like
There's a
two
certain
or
number of
three?
higher level, is it,
Okay, so basically, if you're doing the full DP, you need 3 higher level and 3 standard level. And I don't know what the concern was, but maybe it was that as of now, there are actually 3 classes that you could take. 2 being
Math
standard
classes.
level and 1 being higher level, and all of them are DP. So I'm not sure.
Yep, so the real challenge was preparing enough students for the HL analysis, which is the highest level, most rigorous math class in the diploma program. And so there was concern about getting enough content to students so that enough kids could access that class. And at least for the foreseeable future, what the math department has decided is that they're only going to offer the standard level courses, standard level applications, and standard level analysis. And either one of those is a full 2-year IB diploma program course. Either one of those is enough math to earn the IB diploma if you take the rest of the courses. What a student cannot do is take HL math, because we won't be offering it in the short term. If a student wanted to accelerate and get to a higher level of math, what they would do is take that SL a year earlier. So they would finish it in 10th and 11th grade and then have an opportunity to take another more discrete math class like
At the SL, so there are no HL.
No
math.
HL math in the short term.
And frankly, the amount of students taking HL math right now is
It's pretty small.
very small.
So it doesn't-
We're talking about
yeah.
like a class of like 8.
It's not a big use of teacher resource
Yeah.
right now.
And I know there's at least a couple students of that class of like 10 that are dropping it going forward, just because of it's a lot. It's a lot of math.
It's a
So
really high level.
that takes the place as one of the SL classes, so one of the 3 that you're allowed to have, it has to be a math.
Yes.
Yes.
So, okay. And what's the threshold for offering classes, like the HL classes, or is it just?
This is such a hard conversation that the high school is grappling with right now. So I think that they're at a point of understanding that in fact, they've probably tried to offer too many different diploma program options, so that it makes schedule, when you're offering each course as a single course, because you've only got a handful of kids who need that course, you have a very rigid schedule, and it's hard because you have students who are, they need this class and this class, and they're only offered once, and it's at the same time. So the high school is really doing a thoughtful analysis about what is the threshold for offering a class, and how many offerings are the right number of offerings, so that we can offer a range of options for students, but still have schedules that function and workloads that are humane for students.
Yeah, I think a lot of the struggle with the high school has been like, a lot of classes are combining HL and SL because there's not enough students to kind of justify keeping it separate, or because they just want to condense it so that more classes fit in the timeline. And I know at least a couple of students, which I don't know how this is going to work out, but they are having to go 50-50 on a class, as in the classes at the same time. So they are going to attend half of one and then half of the other, which is really difficult. And I know there are being like solutions like thought to like kind of try to get that to like an absolute minimum. But I know that there are also the class of seniors that graduated, there were a couple students who had to do that. And it's just because you choose your classes before going into junior year. And if you want to continue with the IB program, you really cannot drop those classes. It'd be just because they fit the requirements, and you have to have 6 IB classes to get the full IB certificate. I mean, not diploma, so.
Thanks for sharing that, Nargis. Justin Campbell invited Peter and me and Kathy and Ben, the Rising AP, into a meeting just last week to really show us the nitty-gritty of these conflicts and the scheduling, help us understand how they've improved it incrementally, and help us see some of the hard questions that are coming, probably about offering fewer options for those students who are pursuing the full diploma.
How few are you allowed, like, to still be considered to, like, where's that fluctuation? Is it just that you can have every student 6 DP classes, so And that's the
We
minimum?
could technically offer one path through the diploma and say, these are the 6 classes we offer, and if you're doing the full diploma, this is your path. That's not what we've chosen. We offer quite a lot of choice at this point. I think we haven't hit the sweet spot for the size of our school.
Does the cost vary with how many classes you offer in the DP, or is it just a straight subscription?
The only difference in cost would be, we are obligated to train, each teacher who teaches a diploma program course needs to be trained in that, but that's a really small, I mean, you could get the training for $700 if you don't travel for it. It costs more if we're paying for a hotel and flight to get somebody trained. But that's such a small cost in our big budget, so that would be the only difference I can think of.
And these are considerations we have made both prior to the IB program now as well in mid-core classes or other courses where, you were asking about the threshold in terms of.
Same with
like,
AP prior to all this. I'm sure this was still an issue with AP.
Sure, yeah. I mean, it's hard because at a high school level, and you hear this from any high school principal, if you go down in size and you don't run a course, it's hard to sometimes bring it back. And oftentimes it's getting rid of a program or, film used to be really popular in this school and then slowly the numbers dropped. And of course, these different courses are also tied to people. And so you have the complication sometimes of a 1.0 teacher who's doing this and this, and they can't really plug in somewhere else. So it definitely ebbs and flows. If you look at the number of students, for example, in certain departments, it can be, like historically, it's been quite low. Margaret's probably has experienced this in her classes, just even through.
Yeah, there are certain classes that just get, like the science classes, I know like biology is huge. Like there are so many sections of DP biology. And then chemistry only offers SM. So, and that's partly because of level, but also because of just like not a ton of interest in chemistry. And like you'll in every department there are classes that are like super popular, and then classes that like moderate to smaller.
All right, one more question, then we're gonna.
Oh no, I have 2 questions. Well, so I'll try to make it quick. Unfortunately, this is a complicated question. I'll just piggyback on this last bit. So what you're saying is that with the DP thing, the way it works is that you pay for like a whole product, no matter what you use of it, essentially. So is that so in other words, like at a bigger school, they would sort of make more use of that product?
Oh, that's an interesting question. We pay an annual fee.
Right,
So
does
at the
everyone
high
pay the same annual
school,
fee?
so at the high school, that we pay an annual fee for the diploma program.
Right.
Don't quote me, it's somewhere in the ballpark of $11,000 as an annual fee. And we pay an annual fee for the middle years program,
Right.
which is less than that.
That makes
But
sense.
maybe a couple of $1,000s. Again, I'm not great at memorizing numbers, so I'm estimating for you.
Yeah.
And then we pay a partner fee for the middle school, which is it's like a tenth the price. So we have one middle years program, grades 6 through 10, and we pay the primary fee at the high school and this little partnership fee at the middle school to have that one program. What that fee gives us is, having earned the authorization, it gives us the right to call ourselves an IB school and use all of their branding.
Right.
It also gives us access to, they go through like review cycles of their curriculum, they bring in consultants, it's research-based, so they give us sort of as they keep their curriculum vibrant and keep the professional development that they offer current with the curriculum and instruction that they subscribe to and develop, we have access to that research-based work that we don't have the capacity as a small rural school district to do ourselves.
Right.
So we get access to professional development, we get access to curriculum, we get access to a lot of research-based best practice work and a framework that makes it coherent pre-K through grade 12. So those approaches to learning are what in Vermont we call transferable skills. Well, we didn't need to create our own. Those are created internationally by professionals and their learner profile attributes. We didn't have to make those up school by school. They come with the program. And so it really is a holistic package that we're signing on for. The annual fee gives us access to all of that. We do pay for each of the trainings we send people to or we bring in here. And then in the diploma program, we also pay for exams, much like, AP exams. So I'm trying to think what the other, did I answer your question?
Yes.
Okay.
You can stop.
Got it.
You don't have to keep, that's helpful.
Great.
Thank you. I don't want to take up too much time, that's why I said.
There are two more quick things I would love to say about the plan. One is if you've heard a lot of buzz about Manage Back and how hard it is to deal with. On page 15, in the tech integration section, you can see the very last sentence there is a nod to that. Mark Monahan, our tech integration specialist, he is currently leading a team of teachers to review Manage Back and determine whether we want to improve our current use of it or sunset that to adopt something else. Moving learning management systems is not the kind of thing that happens overnight. There are growing pains and PD investments, but they're doing that deep dive now with teacher voice to really make a informed decision. So there's that. And then I won't talk about the staffing thing. The YRBS data, you might have noticed that our last data is from 2019. The last actual survey was in 2021, but they won't release the results until next fall. So that is the most current we have access to. That's all, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. You met your objective of making this more user-friendly and digestible.
Great.
Yeah, I would agree. I stayed with it for the full 38 pages.
You got a lot of reading this week.
Yeah. No, there's lots of good graphs. It makes it go quickly.
More pictures.
That's it.
You're
Right.
done? All right.
Can
Yes,
I
Nargis.
add something as like a little piggyback to Peter's little report? So I think you're all aware that last kind of session, I just wanted to make a quick comment about this to the board because frankly, I'm not sure where else I could say it. There was a presentation on the part of the IB program and I kind of asked about stress level management. And frankly, I didn't get a super clear answer on that part. And I just kind of wanted to add on to that as a part of the high school, just going forward, maybe something the board would want to think about. And I say this as a part of this, like a large part of the student body that feels this way, especially at the high school. Looking into mandated communication with students and their schools, or at least something that's more structured that currently happens. I believe that, especially with the diploma program and everything that we talk about in terms of, stress and how much of it is really working. And I think it's a great program, but I don't think there's enough communication. And I don't think there's, frankly, communication at all when it comes to big decisions to the student body. For example, the high school, we learned through basically random teachers that the late work window policy would not be carrying over into the next school year, which is, again, not something that we would necessarily fight about. It just would have been something that we would have expected to hear from an authority. But instead, we just kind of had to find out from some teachers that were like, hey, by the way, next year you can't turn things in late. And frankly, I've had an experience at the high school that was really frustrating. A teacher, not going to name Dory, who had assigned 4 separate exams for the last week of school, which we were only notified of the week before, and we went to all possible routes available to us. A counselor was sent to talk, and there was just nothing done there. And so I'm just saying this as a kind of something to think forward to, because there is no real way for students to talk to people who can do things besides my own position that I occupy there, there's really no way for the student body to be in contact consistently with administration or with people who do things at our school or who can change things at our school. The DP coordinators, again, part-time. Our school counselors do make real efforts, and I really admire them for that, but there's only so much they can do. And administration are frankly really hard to get a hold of because they're so busy. But I really believe that it's important to just open avenues of communication, especially if we're talking about the IB diploma and how much we want it to be a positive experience for kids who are going through it. And one of my teachers said, frankly, high school should not be the most stressful period of your whole life. And so yeah, I just I just want to add that on.
Wait, can I ask a question about that? Whose decision is to make 4 exams in 1 week? Is it that teacher or is it an IB?
No, it is not an IB mandated. It is a teacher.
Okay.
Thank you, Nargis.
Just one thing to piggyback on that, in the advisory committee meeting today, we were in smaller groups and I worked with one of the student reps on the committee, and we were talking about social emotional wellness as this is a preview to what you're going to see later on. And we were talking about, related to what you're saying, elevating social emotional wellness to the same level as academic performance was one of the things that we talked about. And we definitely see that going forward, that as we look at where we are, both as a result of the pandemic, but also generally, I think, in our society, which continues to put increasing demands on us and looking at the impacts of social media, et cetera, like that needs to be something that we're carrying in the same way that we're carrying academics. So, yeah.
One of the speakers at graduation had made that very point. That she said, I used to think in terms of greatness, and she changed that to goodness. And it went from more of a robot in getting all this work done to one who was thinking about what she wanted to do and how she wanted to work with people and so on. So this is the same thing you're talking about.
I had the same thought, honestly, having heard that speech.
Yeah, I mean, it was
a great speech.
It was a great speech.
Yeah, and honestly, like being like in the DP program, I have the advantage that and being a good student within that program, I have the advantage that when I speak about stress and about kind of people take me seriously, which is not something that every student has. Students who are viewed as at least like lagging behind or bad in terms of their like work habits. And I know that aren't taken as seriously when they speak about stress because it's seen as like, well, if you turn things in on time, you would have less stress. And I just wanted to point that out as this kind of thing where the IB program shouldn't be the only path forward for the students, but it also should be achievable for students. And I know that in certain classes when teachers have been approached by students saying, hey, I'm having a lot of trouble with this class, and these are some things I'm having trouble with, they have been responded to with, well, you could drop that diploma program. And which is not, I don't think, something that any student should be hearing when they bring concerns. So,
thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we're gonna roll over to the report of the board. We do have a guest here. Steve Cash is here to give us a little update on Ripton's work with the Ripton School Board.
Well, thank you all. I'm happy to come stand at a better place.
Wherever
But
you.
it's kind of tricky.
Might be good just to sit.
Yeah, you wanna sit right there, yeah,
I'll bring my
wherever
chair
you're
back. I don't know
comfortable.
if it's still there. Peter asked me to come this evening to give the ACSD board an update on the Ripton School District's efforts. My name is Steve Cash. I am the chair of the Ripton School District Board. So I don't know how familiar everybody is with kind of where the conversation is at, but what I'll do is just kind of give you the rundown from my perspective, and then if there's questions, things that I didn't cover, then I'll happily go over those. So kind of the biggest thing we're working with right now is the recent legislation that was signed by the governor, H727. I forget the act. I want to say it's Act 176. Don't quote me on that. But that there's four pieces of session law at the end of that legislation that address specifically school districts or schools that are withdrawing or have withdrawn from their districts. That legislation does not name those districts, but for all purposes, Stowe, Starksboro, Lincoln, Ripton are the four that are in that legislation. They all have separate sections at the end of it. Ripton is section 4 within that legislation, and where we are at right now is by July 1st, that legislation granted Ripton the ability to stick with our current operational date, which is July 1st. Sorry if I'm not looking over this way.
It's okay.
July 1st, 2023, or we could adjust that date to July 1st, 2024. We have to have a vote as a school district board by July 1st of this year to determine what we are going to do. As a board, we are going to vote this coming Wednesday, June 15th, and that decision will be made. That decision needs to be communicated to the State Board of Education, and then whoever is the clerk of this board will be hearing from one of us.
Sorry, did you say June 15th or July 15th? Or
June 15th is
for
when
the
we're
board
going to vote.
Which
July
date
1st
you're, okay.
is the date we
Thank
have to
you.
vote by. Any other questions?
So you have to vote, the school board has to vote by the 1st of July to determine whether you will implement the withdrawal on the 23rd or the 2023 or 24.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yep. And there also is some connection with Lincoln in this space, and Lincoln's operational date as of right now is July 1st, 2023. So that is in our board's calculus as well. After that step, we need to submit to the State Board of Education a status report by their regularly scheduled meeting in July. As of right now, that meeting is set for July 20th. So I've been in touch with Oliver Olson, the chair of the State Board of Ed, and we are planning to submit that status report to the State Board of Ed July 20th. I explained to Oliver that gives us as much time as possible to do that, as I'm sure all of you can imagine, starting an SU is a big task. So we're going to do that. I did receive an email from the State Board of Ed outlining 17 different specific tasks that we need to include in that report when we submit it. It's everything from transportation staffing models, staffing plan for the central office, food service, the communication of records from one district to the new SU, and everything in between. So that needs to be submitted by July 20th. As of right now, I believe, this is not my decision to make, but I believe the State Board of Ed is going to have a special meeting in August to review the plan, and we will need to attend that meeting if it's held. And then they will review our plan. They can issue an advisory, they will issue an advisory opinion, either deeming Ripton School District prepared or deeming Ripton School District unprepared. After that, that's an advisory opinion only. Ripton needs to post that on our website, and then we have to have a forum with our town and have a discussion about the State Board of Ed's advisory opinion. From there, Ripton has the choice to either continue with our withdrawal or to make the decision that it is not wise to continue with our withdrawal, not feasible, whatever language you would like to insert in there. And we could have a vote in our town There's two mechanisms to do that. The board can either make the decision, the school board can, or if we're petitioned by 5% of the voters or more, we need to hold that vote and decide whether we continue to withdraw or cease our withdrawal. Depending on the outcome of that vote, we would then communicate with the State Board of Ed about those results, and the vote would have to take place by October 1st. But if the town was to vote that we did not continue with our withdrawal, then we would request the State Board of Ed to.
And in that, when they issue their, after you submit on July 20th, and then they have their special meeting and they give you the report, and they say you're either prepared or not, is that, if they say you're not prepared, is that saying you can't do it, or is it saying you need to do X, Y, and Z, and then you'll be prepared?
So in 727, it is an advisory opinion only.
Okay, so, okay.
Backstopping this whole conversation, the AOE and other people, if there's significant concerns, there are other powers that exist outside of this single legislation. I don't know that those would come into force, but obviously, if officials are concerned about the education a child is going to receive, there's a number of mechanisms they can use outside of this legislation.
I've got a question. So if, presuming that, let's say the Ripon School District Board decides, we think we're ready to shoot for July 2023 and to submit your report, your sort of readiness status update to the State Board of Education, and they say, we don't think you're ready for that date. Is there a mechanism that would trigger, like, maybe you're not ready for 2023, but perhaps 2024? Or because it sounds like the path that you've just laid out is you give them the report, they make this advisory determination, either thumbs up or thumbs down, we think they're ready. I guess I'm curious, like, what happens at that point? Is there an opportunity for the Ripon School District Board to come together and say, okay, maybe we're not ready for 2023, maybe we're ready for 2020, maybe we're aiming for 2024, or does that just trigger are we doing this or not kind of determination? Is my question making any sense? Okay.
Yeah, it's a hard one to answer. One, because there's no script for this situation. This is the first time. So I'm not 100% sure. There is some with Lincoln starting their operational date, July 1st, 2023. It's very hard to imagine that one town could go ahead without the other. It seems like there would be a lot of cost that I don't know how those would get sorted out. Again, I'm pretty far out on my skis saying that because these are all things that I haven't done. I'm just kind of hypothetically trying to lay this out. But yeah, we will potentially have some of those conversations as a board and figure out how we are going to proceed.
Yeah, okay.
Well, this report you're talking about that has to be turned in, is this just a Ripon report or is this a Ripon and Lincoln report?
Some parts of it are particular to Lincoln, to Ripon. Some parts there's just a necessary overlap of us contemplating a shared SU with them. So it is, the State Board of Ed has asked us in particular, and Lincoln, as I said, there's another section in the statute that is relevant to them, but I'm not even going to necessarily get into that because that's another story. But yes, it's specific to Ripon, but there's that necessary conversation. It's kind of like in this room, there's conversations that probably involve one school, but kind of the web moves kind of as the conversation pulls and does.
Interesting.
I guess I have another follow-up question. To what degree I guess I'm wondering if there are proposals or questions as part of Ripon School District's sort of readiness report or status update, whether some of the services that need to be addressed, whether Ripon is looking to ACSD to provide or contract any of those services. That conversation that has happened, will be happening. I guess I'm sort of thinking about ACSD and the impact on us as y'all move forward.
Yeah, so there's some ongoing conversations in two areas, primarily food service and transportation. Food service is one area where there's already a system in place. And if we don't have to remake that wheel and we can contract with ACSD and that works, that's something we're interested in.
And we talked about that on Friday too, yeah. So we met Friday afternoon.
And then transportation is another one, especially with the Hancock Granville bus that comes over the hill. And then figuring out how we would get middle and high school students down the hill. So those two areas.
Gotcha. So I'm just thinking about your timeline. And when you go to the State Board of Education, I guess it would be nice for this board to know the extent or the details of those kinds of contracted services, I guess, if that is something that you all are counting on.
I wouldn't say we're counting on it right now. Okay. We're in the ask phase, and if it's there, we are going to be very plain with the State Board of Education and tell them, like, this is what we have in place, this is where this is at. So if we have an answer, I did send Peter just requesting some numbers as far as food service and what those costs would look like.
Oh, gotcha.
But it is, I mean, it's a short turnaround, and when the legislation was going through, everyone was aware it was a pretty quick turnaround. It's one of the challenging parts.
I mean, one thing that I expressed, or that we talked about, was these two areas, food service and transportation, probably aren't going to be make or break for they don't elevate probably to the same level that instructional services, because, finding a worst case scenario, finding a cook and learning how to do the forms and reporting is probably easier than some of the other pieces of the system that you're putting together. But I have forwarded the information to our food service director to take a look at that. Just to let the board know, I plan to get that information and then bring it to the board for the board to deliberate on, because I think this is something the board should be making a commitment on one way or another, especially as it probably would go into perpetuity, so to speak.
Thanks for this. It's really a clear layout of the sort of timeline stuff. I'm from Weybridge, and we voted a couple years ago. You might have known this, and then our vote did not go the same way yours did. And now Lincoln's doing the Starksboro, and I'm curious. Like, after the last couple of years, I've not been really totally keeping up. Like, today, on the ground, what are the, aside from the timeline thing, what are the motivating factors of Ripon voters, Ripon community members who may want to, who are contemplating this choice? Like, what is the core of their decision-making thing? Now, I assume it's a pretty complicated decision. I don't expect an hour, but like, what are they mulling mainly?
So, I mean, that's a pretty big question, and it's a long one. But
sorry,
I'll do my best to answer. So what I would say is, and you have to understand, there's also a spectrum of ideas. So I don't want to represent, I mean, our vote was kind of in the 60-40 range.
Okay.
So,
on that first vote for
to withdraw.
Right.
Yeah. So to represent it all as one side or the other.
Okay.
It's just not a fair representation of the situation. But what I would say, if I had to summarize it, is in Ripon, being located where we are, there is a lot of people in our town who really feel our school is kind of fundamental to our town. The other part is that our school was built in 1989. So it's not an old school.
Right.
Lead, PCBs, a lot of those conversations, they may not be an issue just because the vintage of the building.
Okay.
So it was an investment the town made that still seems like it has life in it. And there's also some concern about what would happen to our town without kind of that nucleus to it.
If the school would close.
Yes, and what does that look like?
Okay.
However, I will also make the point that throughout this process, we have not been choosing our direction. I said in this very room, I don't know how many years ago, and I've told this to Peter previously, if anybody asked me when we went before the State Board of Ed that we were gonna become our own school district, I would have said no. The assumption was we were going to get assigned to an SU.
Right.
That was very much it. So now we have a much different task in front of us to develop our own supervisory union. So I make that point just because I think for some people looking in from the outside, there's this assumption that Ripton, a town of 700 people, is driving this process. And the reality is similar to what's laid out in H 727. There's a path and we are on it and we are navigating kind of those steps. But it would be way too much credit for us to think of us as controlling the process.
Okay.
If you've gone before the State Board of Ed, they kind of dictate what the conversation's about and you do your best to stay within it, so.
That's interesting, thank you.
Yeah.
There is no control at the state level.
I'm
You
just-
enter into that mechanism, then you're just like.
I just want to say that I just think that where you said, in answer to my question, that there's Ripton and Lincoln parts in this plan that you're presenting, that to know that there's two towns filling in different pieces of the puzzle, and then to know that the board could come back and say you're prepared or unprepared, just seems really hard to take, because you could do the best job you possibly can, and maybe they might take issue with something that Lincoln has put in and vice versa. So my heart goes out to you for filling out a form that has many partners, and you can't necessarily control the outcome based on that.
I appreciate that. I also think there's a reality that, as you all know, if towns are going to work together, there has to be that commitment. And so I think, as much as I don't want to say this because it's a very stressful thing to navigate, but it's an opportunity to see if it's going to work. So take it as that and go from there, as Ripton has throughout, just kind of on our journey. It's not necessarily an opportunity I wanted to have, but I have it. And
the learning curve, you guys.
To be clear with everyone, I don't want to kind of over-represent on Lincoln's behalf. Like, I'm very much here on behalf of the Ripton School District, and I can kind of tell you some of what I'm hearing, but I just be very plain, I do not represent Lincoln, and I just want to make that clear.
Understood. Any other questions for Steve? Well, we really appreciate you being here. And that gives us a great to just hear from you what the process looks like going forward and sort of what the key dates are and decisions and what the process looks like. So thank you very much.
Yeah, and if there is opportunities somehow and Ripton is shown in a different light or an asset, something someday, we'll probably be up on the hill, so reach out. Anything else for me, or I'll probably make my way out?
I'll be in touch.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Steve.
All right, we have two policies that we that were attached for last meeting. And so tonight we are voting on them. I'm gonna hand this to you, Mary.
Right, okay.
Voting on one of them.
I'm one of them.
One of them, because I think we voted on the proficiency-based graduation requirements last year.
We did
No.
not.
Oh, well, that's what we're voting on, but the other one is just a conversation.
Correct.
Yeah, right,
Voting on A, talking about B.
right, okay, so and I'm gonna pull Caitlin in because she's the one that kind of not pushed, but led us on this. Led us to these decisions.
I can be pushy.
Push then led, yeah,
Thank
that's
goodness
it.
she did. But we discussed this last week, or 2 weeks ago, changing some of the requirements for the proficiency-based graduation. And it was based on what the high school guidance and administration felt was fair for accommodating the numbers of students who needed to get graduation requirements. And the theory of knowledge, correct, course had been a full credit for the entire school, and they are suggesting that for students who are not in the diploma program, that it be a 0.5 credit to make the requirement. This was the recommendation from teachers and guidance. Yes?
Just, so I understood the theory of knowledge going down to the 0.5, but I wasn't aware that the personal and professional skills through the Career Center was kind of like a swap.
Is that in there?
It says theory of knowledge or personal and professional skills as available through a partnership with PAACC.
Are we looking, did we publish an old version? We had,
I was gonna say, wow, you just made my day.
so let me tell you the history of why that would have. Let me look at how
It's
we
on here,
published
right?
it.
Yeah.
That's right here.
Was that in our published version before?
I don't remember it
No,
from the
I don't
last time we looked at it, but it's on the one board.
We didn't get a grid the last time of how they broke out.
Right.
This is the first time we've seen a breakout grid.
So let me look at how it's currently published and then tell you the history of why personal and professional skills would have been in there. 1 second.
Sorry, maybe I should just kept my mouth shut and let it pass. And
Suck it up from there, right?
Yep, so on our originally published version, which we published in 2017 and amended in 2019, it had that theory of knowledge or personal and professional skills as available through our partnership with PAHCC. So that's been in there all along. We had originally, I didn't realize that language was still in there, had originally written this with the idea that the Career Center was pursuing the career-related program. And in the career-related program, which is the junior and senior year on a career path as opposed to the diploma program, personal and professional skills is the counterpart to theory of knowledge. And so I was thinking that we had written that language out of the original, but apparently we left it in with that caveat of as available. The Career Center hasn't been authorized and so therefore isn't authorized to teach that class yet, so it's not available. But it
We'll
is.
have to amend once it is.
We could take that, we could take out the as available there.
Okay.
So the only recommended change is this reduction of theory of knowledge from 1 credit to a half credit for non-DP candidates. It creates flexibility in the schedule, takes a little bit of.
Can I just ask one question on this, and I don't want to go down a rabbit hole, but just in light of what Nargis was talking about and sort of what I've heard from parents and students, and I think this has sort of been a long time issue at the high school, where there's always this question of if a kid plays 3 sports, why do they also have to have a credit and a half of PE? And has there been any conversation about if you play a sport, maybe you get a half credit of PE or something, and then that would allow for some more breathing room for kids?
They definitely talk about breathing room for kids and PE as a release valve.
Well, I get that.
However-
I totally understand that that's an argument that can be made, but.
Well, but I would say that the PE is guided by state adopted standards and school sports are not. And
But-
so it's not a one-for-one change, right? Like there's a wellness curriculum that's embedded in school courses that is not embedded in
Right, but at
School
one
sports.
point in time, when my own kids went through here, they were allowed, I think it was up to 1 full credit for playing varsity sports. You had to be on the varsity team and make it through the whole season, and then you got half a credit for each sport.
Peter, do you know if any conversation like that is currently in play? It's not on my radar.
The SBA, I think, took it away after a while. They're the ones that brought it in supposedly, because other schools used to do the same thing, and then I believe it was the SBA that took it away.
Yeah, what do other districts do?
I just feel like there can be an argument made that if the kid is playing a sport, then you can't really argue that they need the 50 minutes or whatever it is of PE during the day for exercise.
Some of this is the curricular change though, where it's less about playing badminton and, doing those kinds of sports, but it's about wellness and it's about learning how to take care of yourself so that when basically like physical wellness, and I call it some social emotional wellness behind it too. So that's part of this, the shift that we've seen in the last 5 years with all of our PE across the district, which frankly is like less about PE. Yeah, but we did do that in Oregon. We started a university-based system there, and we did provide people who were in sports got like a half credit, or that was something that we did. That hasn't been something that we've.
Okay, I just wanted to throw that out there as, because I have heard from numerous, well, certainly my own students, even who are gone, that it was an issue back then, but I feel like I hear from parents like, this seems like something that
I have been told that we do require a half, I was told by Ms. Atkins, I believe that we do require a half credit more of PE/health than is like required by the state.
Yeah.
I can tell you the 3 sending schools around here all require 1.5 PE.
But this is not what's on the table right now.
No, this is not, sorry.
We're changing
Totally
it,
my fault.
and if we wanted to change it in the future,
Right.
is what you're saying, we could come back and change this policy again to compromise or accommodate those kinds of issues. I think those are common issues all over the place.
Yeah.
Constantly.
Okay, so can I have a motion?
Yes, I'd like to move that we accept the amended D1 policy on proficiency-based graduation requirements.
Okay, I said, all right.
All right, questions, comments before we take the vote? Okay, all those in favor of approving the motion on the table, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Great, D1 passes. All right, Mary, the review of D22.
Right, again, I'm gonna pull Caitlin in on this, but ACSD currently does not have a policy on selecting library materials. And the librarians actually brought this to our committee, saying they felt it was really important to get on board with a policy. And they have been working with VSBA. They have come up with a model policy that they highly recommend. It's not, the policy VSBA currently had was just a recommended or something to consider. So they've changed it to be more rigorous to accommodate some of the current thinking about library materials and selections and things. So Caitlin, is there anything else that we want to pick up by then?
Just to credit our librarians, Stephanie Sherman in particular, the librarian at the high school, has been a really strong advocate and has done a lot of work on the sort of state level to advocate for the adoption of this policy. They had shared with us a much more extensive version of this policy that we as a policy committee reviewed in the winter, I believe. And we chose not to move it forward at that time because we were waiting for the official adoption from VSBA. So when VSBA in May formally adopted their model policy, I read it and thought, well, what this does is really takes much of what our librarians had recommended out And if we pull that out and call it procedure, like how do we actually select the texts and adopt this as policy, I basically went back to our librarians and said, does that, if we do both of those things, does that accomplish the task? I mean, they really have put a good deal of care and research into what do we need as a policy and how will we shore it up with procedure. And they were enthusiastically in support of us doing that. So I would say what we have put forward as a policy committee is the VSBA model, and what our librarians know would be the next step would be taking their recommendations for procedure and working those out as an admin team. So I think that this is, getting this on the books for us would be an important resource, just for navigating the complexities of conversations around texts and curriculum. The next one would be selection of curriculum materials, which should be on deck for next year. We're waiting for the SBA update on that one.
Brian, did you?
Yeah, I had a couple of thoughts on this, and if I'm incorrect, I'll admit it. From what I've just heard, there is no selection process at this point. And it's going to be put together in the future. I would like to see, as part of that process, parental input. And I think secondarily, I think I read that maybe one person would make a decision as to what would be available and what would not be available. And I disagree with that probably entirely, because you can have a very biased person in that position. And I think you would need at least a few other insights as to what would be a good thing to add and what would not be so great.
Caitlin, do you want, I think those are things that'll be worked out in the procedure piece of the policy.
Yeah, I don't mean to imply that we don't have a process. Our librarians are trained professionals and go through a process to select texts and to curate and maintain their collections. What we're looking for is, for the first time ever, an ACSD common district-wide policy and common codified procedure, so that they can put heads together and agree about what is the process that we use. And that they can then fall back on the policy and procedure, which also would have procedures for filing complaints, which I think is really important, because we have had complaints about some of the texts that we've had in our system, and formalizing that process for making those complaints and reviewing them, I think is an important safety net for our educators, and it's an important communication avenue for our community.
And I think it's also an opportunity to kind of double down on who we are, what we believe as a district too. And I think when you look at the admin responsibilities here, ABCD, given the current, I think the current context in our country right now, being really clear about what we support, what we value, and having it in policy as opposed to right now, sometimes it's individual interactions that we're having where I'm speaking to someone, Nicole, Caitlin, whoever is speaking to someone about the why, being able to articulate it very clearly, both here and in procedure, I think is really smart.
I think I'd just like to reiterate again, being on the Communications and Engagement Committee, where we're talking about how to get community involved in education. This would be a great opportunity to invite parents and other community members to make suggestions and to offer good advice. I do not want to see them left out of this process.
Brian, so that would be more in like the procedures, in inviting input and such, more so than in the policy.
Wherever it is, I just enjoy seeing it. Thank you.
So this will be warned and we'll vote on it at next month.
I'll let Sharon know.
Yeah.
Great.
Okay, did you wanted us to report out?
Yeah,
on the
so we'll
conflict of
move on
interest?
to committee updates. Do you want to start, Mary?
So our policy committee on the 18th of May met to review our board member conflict of interest policy. And at that time, we invited Pietro Lynn, our attorney, to clarify for us what conflict of interest was. There was some concern that, given the fact that we had board members who were also on another school board, would that create a conflict of interest? And he made it very clear that that was not the case. I just want to read Peter's note because I thought what you wrote, Peter was our recorder at that meeting. But anyway, he said, Attorney Lynn went into detail about what constitutes a conflict of interest and what does not. Specifically, he said conflict of interest generally requires one to have personal or financial interest in the outcome of a board action. He cites examples such as seeking some sort of personal vendetta against a member of the administration, steering contracts for financial gain, serving on a negotiations team to assure a family member has a better contract. He said someone strong, perhaps public opposition to the goals and values of the board does not constitute a conflict of interest. He said that by running for the board, one is a politician, and that may mean a person comes with strong feelings. But this does not necessarily lead to a conflict of interest under the ACSD or the Vermont State School Board policy. So he made it pretty clear that there is no conflict of interest.
Yeah, it was, I went to that meeting and it was, I feel like the policy is far more general. And so it feels like you could cite so many different ways that someone could be in conflict. And in fact, the reading of it by law is much, much more narrow than just me as a layperson or anyone else as a layperson might read it. So it was really, I thought, helpful to hear from him that really it is fairly specific instances where conflict of interest comes into play.
Right. And that was why we had him come, because the policy is so vague in its language that we really didn't know what it all really meant.
But we didn't amend the policy.
Hmm?
But we didn't amend the policy nonetheless.
I don't think we're looking to.
We didn't do it yet, but I think as we come back, well, I think we should be looking at amending the policy to make it clearer what a conflict of interest is. But again, we're looking at the VSBA model policy. I don't know if we want to change that or just make additional comments or some kind of,
I think.
Or just a
clarity.
discussion for the.
Yeah, for
that's
a policy
discussion
committee.
for
So,
policy.
yeah, we will bring that back for vote
At some point.
but we just want to report out on that so it's clear.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I
Steve.
ask how that relates to the case a few years ago where there was a special policy passed concerning me specifically? Does that mean that that was not in fact a conflict of interest and that we need to clean that up?
What was the issue?
That I was on the Vermont NEA board and that I couldn't be in certain.
I don't know that, I don't remember that there was a policy passed for that specific.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't remember there being a policy. I mostly just remember you volunteering to avoid any, any appearance of a conflict of interest.
And the current policy does state that if somebody feels like they would take us, have some kind of a conflict because they're.
I didn't feel that I did. The board seemed to feel that they would be more comfortable if I not be involved
But it's.
in
It's
the
the board.
executive sessions around negotiations and.
And actually, the point you bring up, Steve, is one of the things that the attorney spoke to was that sometimes some of these things are solved in a more informal, communicative way than having to lay out every possible scenario in policy.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
So,
Mary Heather, do you
I
want to?
have a question about this. So now that we know this, like, what does it mean? I guess, like the board has stated publicly that Joanna had a conflict of interest. when we were running for the election.
Yes, it is.
It was in the
Never seen.
newspaper.
It was an op-ed.
Someone, I don't know, it
The
was in the
vice
newspaper.
chair did at the time.
Yeah.
Oh, I said in a letter that I was worried about a conflict of interest.
It was a question.
It was a question for,
But I don't think
for
anybody
voters,
ever
but that was not,
decided that it
that was me questioning voters, that was not this board. in
And I
any
said
way.
the same thing in the letter, it was a question. But this, to me, at this point, that question has been answered.
I agree. So I just think we should correct the record. I mean, there's a lot of people who ask me this all the
This is-
time.
I mean, just
There's
the
no
process
record
of
of this
correcting
board
the record.
taking any position at all.
At all.
But I mean, if you ask people out in the community, they say that, that's what they say.
Perception, though, that's not something that was codified in a record.
Well, it's written in the newspaper. I'm not sure, like,
Well, there's a lot of newspaper.
I guess, I mean, I think, you know, when we had our first meeting after the election, it was a question that was brought up. And my recollection is that we said, okay, this seems like a discussion that the policy committee should look at, which it did, and sought legal advice on, you know, what the breadth of conflict of interest is in this situation. Does it include conflict of interest with respect to, you know, financial things? Does it include conflicting loyalty? I mean, these are broad ideas that we wanted clarity on as a board.
right, and now we have it, and I think we should offer that public clarity.
That is what we're
That's
doing in our
right now.
public
We have
meeting.
public minutes. This is a meeting of the board, a public meeting of the board. The record will show that we've just reported on the meeting with the lawyer that states there is no conflict of interest.
And prior to that, the only discussion we had as a board was, this seems to be a question that we need to ask. Let's have the policy committee do it. Y'all had your public meetings. Now we're having another public meeting to talk about what the determination was. So
I also think you're referring to letters that people wrote as individuals, not as voices of the board. And there's a difference. If you've been authorized by the board to write a letter and the board approves the language that's in the letter, there's a difference between that than writing it as an individual.
I understand that. I just know that the situation was very confusing for a lot of people, and it was very confounding for a lot of people. And it's actually a pretty, I think personally, like the right of someone to serve on a board like this is a pretty important, basic thing that we should get right. And I agree, this is a public meeting. Those 4 people on Zoom are watching it, and the other 10 people who read the minutes will understand as well. But like, I don't know, I think offering some greater public clarity about it matters. I mean, Steve was saying maybe his thing years ago, which I don't know the details of, was perhaps messed up as well. I just, you know, it was a mistake. And I think that
I think that letter was a result of people coming to me and saying, how can this be? How can this be? You know, there may, you know, a conflict of loyalties and a conflict of interest, we have learned are not the same thing, right? And that is on public record. But that letter and anybody else's letter or conversation they had in the supermarket with people was not something that this board approved, was not the voice of this board.
But in that meeting specifically, when you said to the lawyer, you said the board has heard that Joanna has a conflict, that Joanna may have a conflict of interest with people. And you said later that, well, I'm talking about the times, I'm talking about the meetings on the sides of sports games and in the grocery store, because informal conversations that board members have. But you said at the meeting that the board has heard, so I had not known that, because I was not on the board before that. So the board must have, I don't know, but I guess the board did hear those things beforehand, or didn't they?
I think members of the board have got those
The
things.
board questioned it.
Yeah.
Members of the board questioned it, which was our right to question it, but I think what you're asking is for us to publish something that says we retract what we've said. We never said it. Individuals may have said it, questioning it. I'm comfortable now with the lawyer, what he says, fine.
Absolutely.
I can understand it better. But there was a question at one point. But that isn't a board opinion. It's very different.
I have a question around just the, how Pierto was brought into the committee. So are committees allowed to hire consultants outside of the board's recommendation and pay for them? Like, I'm just curious about the process of paying for the lawyer, like, and paying for different consultants on the facilities committee. I'm curious about the process. Like, does hiring outside consultants have to go before the full board? No. So
No,
did the
and committees,
committee-
I mean, lots of committees use consultant. Facilities committee, obviously, like you said, is using a consultant. The negotiations committee works directly with a lawyer. They don't have to come in front of the full board to ask, can we?
The finance committee works with the auditors.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a charge in the budget, there's things built in for legal services, so you can also gain, I think, information about like negotiations that uses legal services a little predictably, unless it goes on forever, or the other way, so.
Yeah, regarding the last statement, I've never seen in our budget something assigned to the school board. Do we need a policy around how we spend, I have no idea what our budget is as a school board member, and even what the procedure is
For hiring someone.
for, actually spending money for the board. I don't know, maybe I just don't know where to look, but I've never seen anything written as a board, how we decide, is this reasonable to spend, $20,000 on, to do or whatever. The role of, I've never seen it, that's all. Is there some place you can point me to, and maybe that would, it's just a knowledge thing I don't have.
Procedure or something?
Or a policy.
Getting back to district hires, then it's a policy group or committee, can not just go out and spend money. It does have to get its approval from someplace. And how much money is there? The committee may want to spend X number of dollars, but how does it know that that amount exists? This is what's being discussed here. What can this group spend? how much money is actually out there that could be allocated for information that we need? I haven't heard an answer to that.
I would say that there's not a set amount every year where the board can only spend because of all the things that come up in a school year, that the board needs to draw on funds to take care of countless, both things that are planned and things that are unplanned. We're basically operating under, if there's a need for something and the issue arises, this is true beyond the board. This is true across the whole school district, where we're spending, we have a budget. Sometimes we exceed that budget thoughtfully, and sometimes we are under that budget because we can be. And so I think it's the same at the board level, where we're, whether it's the committee level or this full board, we talk about whatever the expenditure is, and it falls to me and to Logan to provide you with feedback if the ask is, we're going to go out for a bond next year and we want to spend $500,000 on a marketing campaign and hire 3 consultants. It's going to cost this much. It's our professional responsibility to come back to the board and say, well, given these other things, this is what the impact of that is going to be. If it's asking, if the policy committee is asking for legal advice, that cost is so minimal. That's not impacting, in terms of our budget and our balance. That's standard protocol across all school districts in this country.
Joanna,
I just-
then we'll move on to communication.
I just have to say that I want to challenge that thoughtful, like the bringing in a lawyer. I wrote to the Secretary of State's office before I started the campaign, got a very clear answer from them that I had no conflict of interest, and that cost me $0.
So I made the same call. I called the Secretary of State's office and spoke with head of elections there. And they said that the first thing that they would do if the person in question won the election was to seek legal counsel.
I thought that was VSBA. You did.
I spoke to both. So
So
that
hire a
was,
lawyer.
when you then won, and people questioned, that seemed like the first natural step, and the policy committee agreed, and that's why
The policy committee had actually put it to ask Peter before the vote had happened to clarify, to reach out to the lawyer to clarify what the policy actually meant, because it was so broad that we're like, so what is a conflict? We aren't lawyers, we don't really know. So we had asked Peter before the election even happened.
What are we arguing about here?
Right.
I'm saying, I understand, right now, we're all in agreement that we accept the lawyer's opinion that was given to the policy committee. I think we maybe have a question as to what Jamie would like, I guess, is some sort of declaration from this board, but other than that, I don't think we're arguing that.
I think we're ready to move on to the update of the communications.
Okay. Okay, so our committee has prepared a press release to go out with the facilities committee's facilities master plan final report. We are working with Emily and Sharon in central office to distribute the printed copy, and this is the copy, the report that you all have received electronically. The printed copies will be going out to all ACSD schools, all member town offices, all member town libraries, and all of the local pre-K programs serving ACSD families. And then we will also be distributing it electronically with the press release in our board update. That is coming at the end of the month. I'll get back to that in a minute. It'll go out in the next district newsletter. And we will also probably look into posting it on Front Porch Forum, perhaps putting it in the Addison Independent as well.
And those, the electronic versions will have live links to the electronic report, as well as a shortcut to the school by school summaries, and have the opportunity for folks to, contact our direct board number, or either Victoria or Jen Newseeder as the chair of the facilities committee for any questions. People can also go right to central office and request a printed copy for their own use. So that's also an option. So that's one thing we did. We will be, just a heads up, putting together our quarterly update. So board or committee chairs, be on the lookout for me to look for content, just updates of what y'all have been working on since the last quarter. I'm hoping to get that out like end of June. Our last one was issued end of March, beginning of April. So trying to maintain the quarterly schedule. One thing I do want to say with respect to release of the facilities master plan report, both our committee and the facilities committee felt like, given the other work that we have coming up with the strategic plan for equity, that doing any really heavy public engagement around the report is kind of a heavy lift. And also we would like to coordinate any further facilities planning with strategic plan for equity work. So we don't have any like webinars scheduled or public meetings scheduled to discuss the content of the report. That's something that we'll probably put off until fall after we've done the strategic plan work. But I do want to just ask the board, because I feel, this is just my own personal feeling, I'm not speaking on behalf of everyone at my committee, but I feel like it would be an important gesture, a good opportunity for us to have some mechanism for folks to ask questions, informally talk with someone on the board or something, so that we're not just putting it out there into the ether and just like, we'll see you in September or October. I just want to ask y'all whether you feel like having, whether you feel it would be appropriate to offer, I don't know, like open, what's the word I'm looking for?
Office
Jamie,
hours.
Office hours. I was going to look to you as the professor, like office hours or something, a little bit over the summer or something, as just a way for folks to plug in. And we could do it, virtual office hours, we could do it in person. I'm happy to volunteer my time to do that. I just personally feel a little strange just putting this big thing out there and then not having any other, not having some mechanism for back and forth or for questions. So I just wanted to put that out there as a question to you all, see how you feel about that. That's what our committee's been working on, and we plan at our next meeting to start talking about some best practices for further engagement, so that when that time comes, we have just some more concrete ideas about the best way we can utilize our time and resources. So that's what I've got.
I do think the office hours is an interesting concept. And I mean, I think not just around the FMP, but just sort of on an ongoing basis. I'd be interested, Peter, if you know of any other district that does something like that.
Yeah.
The board, like the board having, say, an every other week or an every week or once a month or whatever window, sort of where someone's, manning a table in here and anybody can come in and talk to a member of the board.
I haven't heard of it, but
I think we'd be pretty bored.
That in itself would
I'd be perfectly willing to do it, but I don't know who's going to come.
Yeah,
here.
and that is a question, how best to utilize our volunteer bandwidth here, and also balancing that with, making sure that folks have the opportunity. So it's just an idea. I
think doing a trial run would be.
I think that's true too. Trials.
Just commit to doing it for, I don't know, a few months or something, and then if nobody shows up, then we have our answer that that's not the way we're wanting to engage, but.
Yeah.
Our policy committee is going to be looking at the public participation model policy that Jamie brought up and other people have brought up over the years this week. So, this is information we can use in our discussion, I think, how to include this in that. So, thank you. I think it's going to be a while before we have a policy that clearly defines it. Right there.
There's one that way too. Keep going.
Take a left. So, the trial, is that just for the, facilities master plan or in general?
I think it should be just, you can come in and ask about anything.
So,
Subject.
So how do you represent the board and make it, because it could be a question about something that we haven't talked about as a board, right? So I get a little nervous about that, because if someone's coming in, they're gonna expect, like if I was doing it, me to speak intelligently about that, and that I am, because I'm peopling the office hours, whatever the word is. I suppose.
You gotta work on new words.
Yeah, exactly, that can work. That's supposed to be me. They would expect me to be able to then represent the board, and I can represent the board.
Yeah, and I think that's a totally valid question. I guess the way I envisioned it is it's kind of a portal for people to come and bring their questions and concerns, and then, and then I kind of.
That would have to be the expectation.
Yeah, I totally agree with you.
Right, and any conversation that would ensue would just be you speaking for yourself.
Right.
Yeah, right, just like if I met somebody on the street,
right,
kind of thing, and that would need to be the expectation of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Peter, you said you're not aware of any system where boards do that. I'm pretty sure that big cities that have professional boards, where you're elected in a position, you have an office and that kind of thing, that they do have office hours, and I'm sure that they probably have some policies around that, what a board member can do and can't do, what they can say about representing the board, because I know people come to them all the time, in an office, so maybe, we're not that big, but possibly look at the policies that they use to control that process.
Yeah, I can definitely.
Is it something you would look at? Where would we find that?
I would say probably policies on the boards.
School board policy.
Yeah, there is a National School Board Association, so you can check there for policies. Mary Heather, one thing I wanted to note is Bridgeport does not have a public library other than the library in the elementary school. Yeah, if you're gonna put a hard copy, I think you would have to probably go in that library.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mary Heather, so you said so your committee wrote the press release?
Yes, our committee wrote the press release and we shared it with the facilities committee to get feedback from the facilities committee on that, and then. Yeah.
Okay, great. When does that go? When does that go live or whatever?
My hope is that we can try to get something out this week with central office.
Okay, cool.
So the printed reports are ready to go. We're trying to sort of coordinate, and I've asked Emily to actually post the report. I don't know if she's done it yet because I need to put the live links to that report in the electronic version of that, if that makes sense. So that's my hope.
Barbara, in respect to what you were talking about in terms of a person comes in and asks you a question and you give them your thoughts, my thought is that they would want perhaps the board's thoughts.
That's what I
So
would
what you can do is say, okay, I've got your question, I'll take it to the board and get you an answer.
Yeah.
That's engagement.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I agree with that.
Okay, any other questions for Mary Heather? Jen's not here. Facilities Committee, actually hasn't met since the last time we met. But we have a meeting scheduled for
Week from this day.
next
22nd.
soon, we have a meeting planned, where we're going to sort of dive more deeply into the secondary school, report. But did I miss anything? Chip, do you have a-
Finance is not met. But we will meet once the quarter ends,
Right,
which is in.
I think we got the date, right? for the-
No.
Sharon was working on the date.
I don't think.
I don't think so.
We don't have a date yet, no, but we will meet, but we haven't.
We talked,
Scheduled it.
Logan and I talked with Sharon about setting a date in early August, right?
She's working on it, yeah,
Yeah.
possibly before the first board meeting in August.
Okay, on to summer board and committees. So traditionally, we don't meet in the month of July. Peter's looked at sort of the workflow and all and thinks that we can do that again this year. So you're off the month of July. Enjoy it, and we'll see everybody back on August.
We do have another
We have
meeting
one more
this
meeting.
month.
I mean, we have another meeting. I know we that. Once we get to July, then we don't have a board meeting, and August, our first board meeting is on the 8th.
And the next meeting, I will be gone, but you'll be in the capable hands of Caitlin, Dr. Steele rather. And one of the big topics will be the recovery plan. We just submitted today, we're reviewing that with everyone.
And has everybody found their cadence in scheduling their committee meetings and all? Good. Is there any other?
Is that other part of the agenda?
Is there, we're moving on to G, the other part of the agenda, yes.
I have something here.
Steve.
So as many of you know, or I hope all of you know, this last Saturday was the high school graduation. Victoria was there as the board chair, and Mary and Noble had a student graduating. There were only 3 other board members there, and this is something that has been known for a long time in advance. I was disappointed to have been only 3 board members there. I really think it's important that we show up for that. It is an important event, and I mean, I was disappointed. I had a lot of people come up to me and say, thank you for coming, and yeah, I just would be remiss if in this meeting I did not say that.
I understand, Steve, I would have been there, but I had a funeral.
I'm not,
So,
you know, calling anybody out.
No,
I'm just saying.
I'm just
8
stating
people,
for the
I'm
public
sure that-
record why I was not there.
8 people have very good reasons,
And I was
but we
working,
have.
and I was at another graduation.
That's not what I had no excuse.
The 3 of us that were sitting in the board reserved seats, it was obvious that most of the board wasn't there. So it did feel a little uncomfortable from that point of view. I think the statement that Steve made, the 3 of us had that discussion and hoped that the reasons people weren't there were because of other specific commitments.
Exactly.
However, it is a cultural event of the people that we represent.
And it's
More so than any other cultural event in this town. You see the parents, you see the grandparents, you see the students, you hear the speeches. And to me, culturally, I've gone to many, many of these graduations and shook hands with people, with students getting them in the old days. But I really think it is valuable. So in the future, we just said one of us would bring it up. And thank you, Steve, because we just felt it was important. I know, Mary, you've gone before and others, and you were there, obviously. In a different status. You've been there. It wasn't to cast dispersions on the people that weren't. It was trying to make a policy, not a policy. Trying to make a sort of statement about what things are helpful. That can also be said about the award ceremony on the day before. Again, that may be difficult for people working at a specific time. but I always find it good fun. You know, it's more fun when I know a lot of the kids. I didn't know as many this year, but I do say that it is again another sort of cultural expression of the end of the year. So for members who are new or members who are old on the board, I just.
Yeah, and it gives you a good sense.
Yeah.
Of sort of, it embodies ACSD, and it's nice.
And there's, the entire Mary Hogan lines up while we walk by, so if we are running for governor or something.
Are you?
And you missed it, you missed 4 incredible speeches.
Yeah.
The
I mean, you get, it's on,
were amazing.
well, MCTV was there, it must be.
Yeah.
It was.
There were 2, that Peter's speech was good,
I thought that was-
excellent, the 2 student speeches were really good.
Yeah.
I thought more, they're always good, but these really hit me,
Really good.
Yeah.
especially the goodness and greatness part.
Yeah.
It speaks just to your questions and just as I did. Anyway, enough of that.
Can I say something? There's no option to raise my hand tonight on Zoom. It's about the topic that was just being discussed about attending these additional like extracurricular events. We get a lot of emails about them, and it is hard to know what to prioritize. And there isn't like an RSVP system. So like at the graduation, if there were 10 empty seats, that would be odd, but there was no RSVP for it to, you know, shave it down to 3 seats or something. So it didn't look like there were all these empty seats. And, you know, like for the record, I teach gymnastics, and I taught 6 classes that day, and it was planned, you know, a long while in advance. So, but you know, if somebody had a seat saved for me, I kind of feel bad. I didn't realize that was the case.
Okay, can I have a motion to adjourn?
Sure, we adjourn.
A second.
Excellent.
Second.
Suzanne. All right, we're adjourned at 8:54. Thank you.
This wasn't a guilt trip.
I